Jackson Pierce had always prided himself on his ability to solve any problem. As a resourceful engineer, he was used to handling everything that came his way, until his ship crashed on an alien planet. The soft hum of the ship's engines had suddenly faltered, followed by a blinding flash of light. And then, nothing. When Jackson regained consciousness, his surroundings were unfamiliar. Rocky terrain stretched out before him, and the sky above was an eerie shade of purple. His head throbbed with pain, and his body ached from the violent crash landing. Panic began to rise in his chest as he tried to move, only to find his leg pinned beneath the twisted metal of the wreckage. He gritted his teeth, trying to focus on what needed to be done, but every movement sent a sharp jolt of pain through his body. He had to survive. He had to get out of here. His communication device was broken, and there was no sign of any other survivors from the expedition. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. He had no choice but to try and get to higher ground and signal for help, even if he had no idea where to begin. Struggling, Jackson crawled away from the wreckage, his breath coming in labored gasps. His survival instincts kicked in, and he fought to remain calm, despite the hopelessness creeping in. That's when he saw it, a flash of light in the distance, the unmistakable shape of a ship soaring across the sky. He couldn't believe his eyes. Was it a rescue? Or was it another threat? Jackson's heart raced as he pushed himself to his feet. With his legs still sore, every step felt like an eternity. But he kept moving. He had no choice. He had to make it to that ship, no matter the cost. It wasn't long before he saw it. A sleek, imposing spacecraft landing just a few hundred yards ahead. The ground trembled beneath him as the ship touched down with a soft, almost graceful thud. He shielded his eyes from the dust and debris kicked up by the landing, his pulse pounding in his ears. And then she appeared. A figure stepped out from the ship's hatch. Tall and commanding, her posture exuded authority. Jackson's breath caught in his throat as he took in the sight of her. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. A striking alien woman with skin that shimmered like burnished copper, glowing faintly under the alien sun. Her eyes, silver and intense, scanned the area with the precision of a predator, as if assessing every detail of her surroundings in an instant. Her long, dark hair flowed like silk, and she wore a suit of armor that looked both functional and regal, with intricate designs that suggested a deep culture and history. Jackson couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as she walked toward him, her presence overwhelming. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice calm and measured, though there was a definite edge of authority in it. Jackson could only nod weakly, struggling to keep himself upright. She seemed to notice his exhaustion and didn't hesitate. With one swift motion, she bent down and easily lifted him from the ground, her strength astonishing. Jackson blinked in disbelief as the alien woman's eyes softened and her grip on him tightened, ensuring he wouldn't fall. "Come with me," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I'll help you. But you must trust me." Jackson felt a mix of awe and confusion as the alien woman effortlessly carried him toward her ship. Her strength was beyond anything he had ever seen, and despite the strange circumstances, he found himself trusting her. There was something about her presence, something commanding and reassuring. As they approached the spacecraft, he could hear the soft hum of its engines and see the sleek, polished exterior reflecting the alien sunlight. It was unlike any technology he had encountered before. The design was elegant, with smooth curves and shimmering metallic surfaces, almost as if it had been crafted with a purpose far beyond mere function. Jackson couldn't help but marvel at it, his mind racing to understand how something so advanced could exist. When they reached the ship, the hatch opened automatically, and Jackson was carefully guided inside. The interior was just as impressive as the outside, with walls that seemed to pulse with soft, ambient light. The air was crisp and clean, with a faint scent that reminded him of fresh rain. It felt like he had stepped into a different world entirely. The alien woman set him down gently on a padded chair and went to work, scanning his injuries with a handheld device that emitted a soft blue glow. Jackson winced slightly as it passed over his broken leg, but the pain faded almost instantly. The device was like nothing he had ever seen. No needles, no invasive procedures, just a quiet hum as it healed him. "You'll be fine," she said in her calm voice, glancing at him with a sharp, assessing gaze. "You are fortunate that I was nearby. Your crash could have been much worse." Jackson nodded, still a bit dazed by the entire situation. He had no idea who this woman was, or where he was, but one thing was clear: she had saved his life. "Thank you," he said, his voice low but sincere. The alien woman gave a small nod, but her expression remained unreadable. "I'm Captain Naira Valen," she said, introducing herself. "I lead the Vraxian enforcers. As for where you are, this is my ship, the Vencora. You are now under my protection." "Vraxian enforcers," Jackson repeated, trying to make sense of the words. "I've never heard of them." Naira's silver eyes narrowed slightly as she studied him. "The Vraxians are not a species known for cooperation with outsiders. We are a warrior race, born from battle and survival. But I do not bring you here as a prisoner." She paused, her gaze softening just a fraction. "I saved you because I believe you are more than what I was told. You may not fully understand it yet, but you are no longer alone." Jackson felt a lump in his throat. Alone. The word hit him harder than expected. He had always been independent, even as a child, but the crash, the isolation. He realized just how much he had been alone out there on that alien planet. He wasn't sure what to make of Naira's words, but for some reason, they gave him a sense of hope. "I don't know how to repay you," he said, his voice low, "but I will do whatever I can." Naira's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "For now, you need only rest. We have much to discuss, Jackson Pierce. The future you once knew is gone. And now you are part of something much greater." Jackson sat quietly in the luxurious, dimly lit room aboard the Vencora, his mind racing. He still couldn't believe what had happened. One moment, he had been stranded alone on a desolate planet, and the next, he was aboard an alien warship, cared for by a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a storybook. Captain Naira Valen, the Vraxian leader, had saved his life, and he was now a part of something much bigger than he could have imagined. It was hard to process everything all at once. As the ship hummed softly around him, Jackson's thoughts were interrupted when Naira entered the room. She looked every bit the leader she claimed to be, her posture strong and confident, her armor gleaming under the lights. Her silver eyes met his, and for a brief moment, he felt a jolt of unease. She was different, commanding, unyielding, but there was something in her gaze that made him feel safe despite the unknown. "I know this is overwhelming," Naira said, her voice gentle yet firm. "But there is no turning back now, Jackson Pierce. You've been brought here for a reason." Jackson's brow furrowed. "I still don't understand. Why me? I'm just an engineer. I don't belong in your world." Naira took a seat across from him, her gaze unwavering. "You may not know it yet, but you possess qualities that are rare among your kind. Your resilience, your ingenuity, they are exactly what we need." Jackson leaned forward, intrigued but still confused. "What do you mean? What does the Vraxian Empire need with me?" Her lips curled into a slight smile, as if she had been expecting this question. "The Vraxians are warriors. We are a people forged by battle, but even we must evolve. I lead my people not only with strength, but with the wisdom to understand when to adapt. And right now, we face a challenge that requires more than just brute force." Jackson's curiosity grew, and he sat up straighter. "A challenge? What kind of challenge?" Naira's expression darkened slightly. "Our enemies are relentless. The Exorethians, another faction from a distant galaxy, have begun to encroach on our territory. They seek to claim the resources of the Vraxian homeworld, and they will stop at nothing to do so." Jackson's mind spun with the revelation. Wait, so you're saying you want me to help you fight them? Naira nodded, her silver eyes gleaming with determination. Not just fight. We need to outsmart them. That's where you come in, Jackson. Your engineering skills, your ability to think outside the box. Those are the qualities that could tip the scales in our favor. Jackson had never been one for warfare. He was a man of logic, of design, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to step into a battle on this scale. But something in Naira's words resonated with him. She believed in him, and for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he wanted to believe in her too. I'm not a soldier, he said slowly, still processing everything. I'm just an engineer. Naira leaned forward, her gaze softening for the first time since they'd met. And that is exactly why you're important. The Vraxians need more than warriors. They need visionaries. And I believe you can help us shape a future where our people don't just survive, but thrive. Jackson hesitated, the weight of her words sinking in. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. The path ahead would change him forever. And despite the risks, he felt an unexpected spark of determination stir within him. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind for Jackson. He was no longer the lone survivor of a crash, stranded and helpless. Now he was a part of something bigger, something far more dangerous and exciting. As Captain Naira Valen's guest, he was shown the inner workings of the Vencora, a ship that seemed to pulse with life and advanced technology. The crew, a mix of different alien species, greeted him with curiosity and caution. Among them was Zora Korin, Naira's second-in-command, who seemed to scrutinize Jackson at every turn. Zora was an imposing figure with jet-black skin and piercing amber eyes. She didn't speak much, but her presence was felt in every room. Despite Naira's trust in him, Zora made it clear that she wasn't so easily convinced. Jackson spent most of his time getting to know the ship and its systems. The advanced technology fascinated him. Holographic interfaces, alien weapons, energy shields, and propulsion systems that defied everything he had learned on Earth. He found himself poring over schematics and data, trying to learn as much as possible. But despite the excitement, a lingering sense of unease gnawed at him. This wasn't his world. He wasn't a soldier or a fighter. What had he gotten himself into? One evening, as Jackson was working on a set of star maps in the ship's command center, Naira approached him. Her usual composure was replaced with a hint of something more personal, an expression that Jackson couldn't quite place. Her silver eyes locked onto his as she spoke. "How are you adjusting?" she asked, her tone soft, but not without authority. Jackson hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "I'm learning. But this is all a lot to take in. I never thought I'd end up here, on a ship full of warriors, talking about defending galaxies. I'm not sure I'm cut out for this." Naira's lips quirked into a small smile, though her eyes remained serious. "You've already proven that you have more to offer than you realize. I didn't bring you here to fight alongside us in the traditional sense, Jackson. I brought you here because I believe your mind can help us win the war we're facing." He frowned. "But I'm not a strategist or a tactician. I'm just an engineer." Naira took a step closer, her presence commanding but not overpowering. "You see only the limitations of your skills. What I see is someone who can think in ways my people cannot. You think outside the box, Jackson. In this war, that is exactly what we need." Jackson felt a knot form in his stomach. It was true. He had always approached problems with creativity, finding solutions where others saw none. But the stakes here were higher than he'd ever imagined. This wasn't just about fixing machines or solving equations. This was about survival. And yet, something in Naira's voice stirred something in him, a desire to prove himself, to be more than just a man of Earth. "I'll do whatever I can," Jackson said, his voice firm with determination. Naira nodded, her eyes gleaming with approval. "I knew you would. This ship may not be your home, Jackson, but we are your allies now. and I will make sure you're ready for whatever comes next." Jackson's life aboard the Vencora was becoming a blur of endless training, strategy sessions, and late nights studying alien technology. He had started to adapt to life on the ship, but the pressure weighed on him. Captain Naira Valen had made it clear he was important now, not just because of his engineering skills, but because the Vraxians were desperate for fresh ideas. Their fight against the Torethians, a ruthless and technologically advanced enemy, was growing more intense by the day. And though Jackson wasn't a soldier, he found himself drawn deeper into the conflict. He knew that his mind was their secret weapon. Yet the more he learned, the more he understood the gravity of the situation. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of simulations and briefings, Jackson found himself alone in the ship's observation deck. The stars outside were mesmerizing, swirling in their never-ending dance. He leaned against the cool glass, his thoughts drifting. It was hard to believe how much had changed in such a short amount of time. Just weeks ago, he had been on Earth, living a normal life. Now he was part of an intergalactic war, surrounded by beings whose very existence seemed impossible. Suddenly, he felt a presence beside him. He turned to find Naira standing there, her posture as perfect as ever. She was always so composed, so sure of herself, but Jackson had begun to notice the subtle signs of exhaustion beneath her confidence. The weight of leadership had to be taking its toll on her. "You've been working hard," Jackson said quietly, giving her a half-smile. "You should take a break." Naira didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood beside him, gazing out at the stars with a faraway look in her silver eyes. It was a rare moment of vulnerability, one that Jackson rarely saw. "I can't afford to take a break," she finally said, her voice soft but resolute. "Every decision I make affects the lives of my people. I can't afford to be weak." Jackson was quiet for a moment, unsure of what to say. He understood the burden she carried. He had seen it in her eyes, even during their brief interactions. Naira was a leader, a warrior, and yet there was something in her that longed for peace, for respite. "You don't have to carry it alone," Jackson said, his voice steady. "You have a whole crew here who believes in you, including me." Naira turned to him, her gaze softening for just a moment. "Thank you, Jackson," she said, her tone sincere. "But this is my responsibility. I am the one who has to protect them all. And if I fail—" "You won't fail," Jackson interrupted gently. "Not as long as you've got people by your side who believe in you. You've already proven that you're more than capable." There was a pause, and for the first time, Jackson saw a flicker of something in Naira's eyes. Appreciation, maybe even trust. It was fleeting, but it was there. "We will win this war," Naira said, her voice firm once again. "But we will need every bit of ingenuity we can get. And that's where you come in, Jackson. Your mind will help us turn the tide." Jackson nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He didn't know how, but he knew he was ready. For the first time, he truly believed that his place was here, by Naira's side. Together, they would face whatever came next. Jackson had been aboard the Vencora for several weeks now, and the weight of his new reality was beginning to settle in. The war between the Vraxians and the Torethians was intensifying, and every day felt like it brought new challenges. Captain Naira Valen had kept him busy, constantly involving him in strategy meetings, combat simulations, and working on advanced technology. The more he learned, the more he understood just how high the stakes were. But no matter how much he tried to prepare, there was one thing he hadn't expected: betrayal. It came one evening when the ship's alarms blared, jolting Jackson awake from a restless sleep. He scrambled out of bed, his heart racing, and rushed to the command center. Naira was already there, her face grim as she studied the holographic display. "We've been compromised," she said, her voice steady, but laced with an edge of urgency. Jackson's eyes darted to the screen, where the image of a Vraxian ship appeared. The ship was part of their fleet, but it wasn't responding to their communications. There were no distress signals. And worse, the ship's weapons were powering up. How is that possible? Jackson asked, his mind racing. The Vraxian fleet was supposed to be loyal. Who could have done this? Naira's silver eyes narrowed as she examined the data. It's a betrayal, Jackson. We've been infiltrated. Jackson felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The thought that someone on their side could turn against them was almost too much to bear. He glanced around at the crew members in the room, who were now moving swiftly to prepare for the worst. There was a sense of quiet tension in the air, and Jackson realized just how vulnerable they were. Naira's voice broke through his thoughts. "I need you to help me get to the core of the system," she said firmly. "We need to shut down their access to our weapons before they can do more damage." Jackson nodded, swallowing his fear. He had no time to question what was happening or who had turned against them. He had to focus. With Naira leading the way, they moved quickly through the ship's narrow corridors, the sound of their boots echoing in the quiet. It felt surreal. 1 minute, they were planning their next move in the war, and now they were fighting against someone who was supposed to be on their side. They reached the control room, where they encountered Callan Trivak, one of Naira's most trusted officers. Jackson's heart sank when he saw the look on Callan's face. Cold, calculating. Callan had always been quiet, but he had never given any indication that he would betray them. "I've made my decision," Callan said, his voice emotionless. "The Ctorethians are the future, and the Vraxians are too weak to lead us into that future." Jackson's blood ran cold. Naira's expression hardened, her voice low but fierce. "You were one of us, Callan. This is treason." Callan's eyes flashed with contempt. "There is no loyalty to a dying cause. I've made my choice, and I'm not going back." Before Jackson could react, the room erupted into chaos. It was clear now that they were under attack, not just from their enemies, but from within their own ranks. As alarms blared and lights flickered, Jackson and Naira exchanged a quick glance. There was no time to hesitate. "We fight, Jackson," Naira said, her voice fierce with determination. "We fight to survive, and we fight to protect the future." With that, the two of them sprang into action, working together to disable Callan's control over the ship's systems. Jackson felt his heart pounding in his chest as the weight of the situation hit him fully. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about loyalty, betrayal, and the people who depended on them. The battle for control of the Vencora had escalated far quicker than Jackson had anticipated. Callan Trivak, once a trusted member of Naira's inner circle, had betrayed them without hesitation. As Jackson and Naira moved quickly to disable the traitor's hold over the ship, they could hear the chaos echoing throughout the corridors. The crew was scrambling, caught between loyalty to Naira and the fear of Callan's sudden betrayal. It was clear that this wasn't just an internal conflict. The fate of the ship itself was on the line. With Naira leading the way, Jackson followed her into the control room, his heart pounding in his chest. The air was thick with tension, the hum of the ship's systems buzzing beneath their feet. Naira didn't hesitate as she accessed the main console, her fingers flying over the holographic interface. The room lit up with digital maps and schematics, showing just how deep Callan's reach had gone. Jackson's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. Callan hadn't just sabotaged their weapon systems. He had also disabled the ship's communication with the rest of the Vraxian fleet. "We can't let him get away with this," Naira muttered, her silver eyes gleaming with resolve. Jackson nodded, but there was a gnawing feeling in his gut. Callan wasn't acting alone. There had to be more involved. The ship's defenses were locked down, and they were running out of time to restore full control. Jackson worked beside Naira, his engineering skills coming to the forefront as he tried to bypass the systems Callan had compromised. It wasn't easy, and every failed attempt made the weight of the situation heavier. As they worked, a voice crackled over the comms. It was Callan, his tone laced with smug confidence. "You think you can stop me, Naira? The Vraxians are weak. Your empire is crumbling, and I will be the one to lead it into the future." Naira's expression hardened. You were once part of this family, Kalen, and now you've become nothing but a traitor." The message cut off abruptly, but the damage had already been done. Jackson knew that the threat was real. Kalen wasn't just seeking power, he was looking to dismantle everything Naira had fought for, and with the crew divided, they were vulnerable. Jackson's mind worked furiously as he scanned the console for a way to restore communication with the fleet. He needed to warn them, to get their backup. He could feel the pressure building, but something inside him clicked. His eyes locked on a sequence of codes, and with a few quick keystrokes, he bypassed Kalen's lockdown. The ship's communication systems came back online, and Jackson let out a breath of relief. "We've got contact," Jackson said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Naira's eyes lit up with a mixture of relief and determination. "It's not over yet," she said, her voice firm. "Now we stop him." Just as they thought they might have gained the upper hand, the ship lurched. The warning alarms blared, signaling that Kalen had initiated an attack, one last attempt to gain control. Jackson's heart raced as he followed Naira to the command bridge, where the final confrontation awaited. He knew this was it. There was no turning back now. They would have to face Kalen, and they would have to do it together. With the fate of the Vencora hanging in the balance, Jackson finally realized the gravity of the situation. This was more than just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the soul of the Vraxian people. The tension on the Vencora was suffocating as Jackson and Naira made their way to the command bridge. The ship's alarms were deafening, the flashing red lights casting an eerie glow over the corridors. Jackson's heart raced, his mind still processing the events that had led them to this point. Kalen Trivek, the once loyal officer, had betrayed them, and now the ship was in chaos. Naira's face was set in grim determination, her every movement exuding a quiet but powerful strength. Jackson couldn't help but feel a deep respect for her. Despite the betrayal of one of her closest allies, she remained focused, unwilling to let the crisis break her. As they approached the bridge, Jackson could hear the crackle of voices over the comms. The crew was scattered, some still loyal to Naira, others caught in the web of Kalen's manipulation. Jackson knew they had to act fast. If they didn't regain control of the ship soon, it might be too late to stop Kalen and his plans. Naira reached for the door to the command bridge and paused, turning to Jackson. "This is it. Stay focused. We can't afford mistakes." Jackson nodded, though a knot of anxiety twisted in his stomach. This wasn't just about fixing machinery or making quick decisions. This was about their lives, the future of the Vraxian people, and the life-or-death consequences of Kalen's betrayal. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this level of responsibility, but there was no turning back. The doors slid open, revealing the command bridge, now dimly lit and filled with the sound of clashing commands. The once calm and controlled space was now chaotic. Several crew members were at their stations, trying to hold back the systems that Kalen had compromised. In the center of it all stood Kalen himself, his face twisted with anger and determination. "Naira." Kalen sneered as he turned to face them. "You were always weak, too caught up in your ideals to see what was truly necessary." Naira's eyes hardened, and her voice was as cold as steel. "You were once one of us, Kalen. I trusted you. But this is treason. And it ends now." Kalen laughed bitterly, his eyes glinting with a mixture of rage and desperation. "You think you can stop me? The Vraxians are a dying breed. The Exorethians will leave the galaxy, not your outdated empire." Jackson's pulse quickened as the confrontation escalated. He had no love for Kalen. His betrayal was unforgivable. But Jackson couldn't help but feel a weight on his shoulders. Naira needed him now more than ever. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was part of this crew, part of the fight. He took a deep breath and moved to a nearby console, his hands shaking slightly as he accessed the systems. He had to focus. The fate of the Vencora, and perhaps the future of the Vraxian people, rested in his hands. Kalen, seeing Jackson working at the console, let out an enraged shout. You think you can fix this? You're nothing but a human engineer. This ship, this empire, it's all mine now." Nara stepped forward, her voice firm and unwavering. "Not while I'm still standing." In that moment, something inside Jackson clicked. He wasn't just an engineer. He was a fighter too, and he had a responsibility now, not just to himself, but to Naira and the entire crew. Together, they could take down Kalin. He quickly disabled the final system that Kalin had been using to lock down the ship's defenses. With a final command, the Venkora came back to life, its weapons systems ready and its communication back online. "Now," Naira said, her voice steady, "we finish this." Jackson's heart raced, but his resolve was stronger than ever. They were in this together, and together they would fight for the future of the Vraxian people. Kalin's betrayal had nearly torn them apart, but it had only made them stronger. The battle for the Venkora wasn't over yet, but Jackson knew one thing for sure: they weren't going to lose. Not now. Not ever. The final confrontation with Kalin Trivek had left the Venkora shaken, but it wasn't over yet. Jackson stood beside Captain Naira Valen, his heart still pounding from the intense battle. They had regained control of the ship, but Kalin hadn't surrendered easily. He had fought with every ounce of his strength, trying to destroy everything Naira had built. Despite the chaos, Naira had remained calm, her leadership unwavering even in the face of betrayal. Jackson couldn't help but admire her. He had seen her lead her crew with precision, making decisions in the heat of battle that had kept them all alive. But now, after all the chaos, the damage was done. Kalin had escaped, and though they had stopped him for now, Jackson knew he wouldn't be gone for long. The threat he posed was far from over. "We've got to find him, Naira," Jackson said, his voice firm despite the exhaustion that weighed on him. "We can't let him regroup and come back stronger." Naira nodded, her expression hard as she surveyed the damage to the ship. The command bridge was in disarray, but the crew had already begun repairs, working quickly to restore order. Despite the chaos, there was a sense of unity among the crew, a shared understanding that they had been through something monumental together. "I know," Naira said, her voice low and determined. "But we also have to think about the bigger picture. The Xarethians are still a threat, and we can't afford to be distracted by one traitor. Our people need us now more than ever." Jackson's gaze softened as he looked at Naira. She had lost a trusted officer, someone who had been with her for years, and yet she was already thinking about the future of her people. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a leader in every sense of the word. "We'll deal with Kalin," Jackson said, more to reassure himself than anyone else. "But you're right. The war against the Xarethians isn't over. We need to be ready." Naira turned to him, her silver eyes meeting his. "You're more than ready, Jackson. I didn't bring you here to just fix things. You've proven yourself more than I could have imagined." Jackson felt a surge of pride at her words. She had always believed in him, even when he had doubted himself. But now, standing at her side, he realized that he wasn't just an engineer anymore. He was part of something far bigger, something that could change the course of the war. They both were. The Venkora was still intact, but the road ahead was uncertain. Kalin might have escaped, but Jackson and Naira knew that the fight wasn't over. There was still work to be done, and there was still hope. Together, they would face the coming storm, and together, they would rebuild what had been broken. Jackson glanced at Naira once more, his resolve solidifying. They were in this together, and no matter what happened next, they would face it side by side. The future of the Vraxians and their alliance was in their hands, and as long as they had each other, there was no obstacle too great to overcome.